They tell you that if you keep your head down, work hard, and save your cash, you're gonna make it. They tell you that the system is built to protect you, that the money in your pocket is real, and that the rules apply to everyone equally. They lied to you. The game you are playing right now is rigged. It has been rigged for over 50 years, and the people running the table are banking on the fact that you don't know the history of the hustle. You were walking around thinking the floor is solid, but the truth is, the foundation cracked a long time ago. Look around you. Does it feel like the world is shaking? Does it feel like no matter how fast you run, the finish line keeps moving further away? That isn't an accident. That is the design. To understand how we got here into this mess of inflation, debt, and chaos, you have to go back to the moment the crime was committed. You have to go back to the day they changed the rules of the game without telling the players. Most people think money is real. They think a dollar bill represents value, hard work, something tangible. But the guys at the top, the ones moving billions while you stress over rent, they know the truth. They know that money is just a concept, and concepts can be manipulated. There was a man who managed more money than most countries ever see. He learned this lesson the hard way. He was on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange in 1971. He was young, hungry, watching the ticker tape, trying to make his mark. But that summer, the US government did something that should have been impossible. They went broke. See, before 1971, the game had a golden rule, literally. The paper money in your wallet was a claim check. It was a receipt. If you had $20, you could walk into a bank and demand $20 worth of gold. The gold was the real money. The paper was just a way to carry it around. This system kept the government honest. They couldn't spend what they didn't have because eventually someone would ask for the gold. But politicians are like addicts. They get hooked on spending. They get hooked on the power that comes with writing checks they can't cash. Throughout the 1960s, the US government was spending money like a drunk sailor. They were fighting wars in Vietnam. They were building massive social programs at home. And they were projecting power all over the globe. They were writing billions of dollars in checks, but the gold in the vault wasn't growing. They were creating paper claims on gold that didn't exist. They were printing phantom wealth, hoping nobody would check the books. But in global economics, there are no secrets. The rest of the world isn't stupid. The French, the British, the other major players, they saw the hustle. They looked at the mountain of paper dollars flooding the world, and they looked at the shrinking pile of gold in the US vaults, and they did the math. They realized the US was bluffing, so they showed up at the window. They started trading in their paper dollars for actual gold. The US gold supplies started bleeding out. It was a run on the bank, but the bank was the United States of America. The government had two choices. Choice one, stop spending, tighten the belt, admit they were broke and face a massive depression. Choice two, flip the table and change the rules. On August 15, 1971, President Richard Nixon went on national television and pulled the rug out from under the entire world. He looked into the camera and told the American people and every foreign nation holding dollars that the window was closed. No more gold. The dollar was no longer a claim check. It was just paper. In the streets, we call that a default. If you owe a man money and you tell him you aren't paying, that's a default. In the business world, we call that bankruptcy. But in the world of empires, they called it monetary policy. They severed the link between the dollar and reality. The insider walked onto the trading floor the next morning expecting a bloodbath. He thought the market would crash. He thought panic would set in because the currency had just been revealed as fake. But that's not what happened. The market didn't crash. It rallied. It shot up. Why? Because when the money's trash, the price of everything else goes up. It wasn't that the stocks were worth more. It wasn't that the companies were making more profit.
profit. It was that the dollar was worth less. They had watered down the product. Think about it like a drug dealer cutting his supply. If you take a kilo of pure product and mix it with 50% filler, you have more product to sell, but the quality is garbage. That is what they did to your savings. That is what they did to your paycheck. They printed more paper to cover their debts, and in doing so, they stole the value right out of your pocket without ever breaking into your house. This wasn't a one-time thing. This was the new normal. This was the moment the U.S. government realized they had a cheat code. If they ever ran into trouble, if the debt ever got too high, they didn't have to pay it back. They could just print more money. But every time they print, the gap between the rich and the poor gets wider. The people who own assets, stocks, gold, real estate, they get richer because the prices of those assets rise with the inflation. But the people who work for wages, the people who trade their time for dollars, they get crushed. Their paycheck stays the same, but the cost of bread, gas, and rent goes through the roof. This is the fix. This is the trap. And it's been squeezing you for 50 years. But to really understand where this ends, you have to understand the come-up. Empires don't just appear out of nowhere. They are built. They are built on hunger, on discipline, and on a killer instinct that most people are too afraid to tap into. History is a cycle. It's a loop. The Dutch Empire in the 1600s, the British Empire in the 1800s, and the American Empire in the 1900s. They all followed the exact same script. It starts in the mud. It starts with a group of people who have nothing to lose and everything to gain. They are the underdogs. They are the ones willing to outwork, outsmart, and outfight the guy on top. This is the rise. In the life cycle of an empire, this is the most dangerous phase because the rising power is lean and mean. It starts with education, but I'm not talking about sitting in a classroom memorizing dates. I'm talking about training. I'm talking about a culture that values discipline, character, and respect for the rules. When a society is in the come-up phase, parents are tough on their kids, communities are tight, people respect hard work because they know that's the only way out. This discipline creates a lethal weapon: innovation. When you have a generation of people who are smart, disciplined, and hungry, they start inventing things. They change the game. The Dutch didn't just sail ships. They invented new types of ships that could travel the world faster and cheaper than anyone else. They invented capitalism itself, the stock market, so they could fund their expeditions. They changed the mechanics of how money moved. The British did the same thing with the Industrial Revolution. They built the steam engines that powered the world. They built the factories that crushed the competition. And the Americans, we built the assembly line, the airplane, and the internet. When you invent the best technology, you produce the best products. When you have the best products, you own the trade routes. You dominate the market. And when you dominate the trade, you need muscle to protect it. You build the biggest military on the block, not just to show off, but to make sure nobody touches your shipments. It's a perfect machine. You make money, you invest it in your tech, in your military, and you get stronger. You act like a unified crew. Everyone is moving in the same direction. The internal fighting is low because everyone is getting paid. The pie is growing, so nobody is fighting over the crumbs. But the ultimate prize, the thing that every empire chases, is the reserve currency status. This is the crown. This is the black card. When you're the undisputed boss of the world economy, everyone else wants to do business in your language. They want to save their money in your currency. They trust you more than they trust themselves. Having the reserve currency is an exorbitant privilege. It means you can borrow money cheaper than anyone else. It means you can trade with the whole world with paper that you print in your own basement. Imagine if you could go to the grocery store, the car dealership, and the mall and pay for everything with IOUs that you wrote on a napkin. And imagine if the store owners accepted those napkins as if they were gold. That is the position of the reserve currency holder. It is the ultimate leverage. It allows you to punch above your weight class. It allows you to build a lifestyle that you technically can't afford because the rest of the world is willing to spot you the cash. But this power power, this ultimate advantage, it is also the poison. It is the beginning of the end. Because when things get too easy, when the money comes too cheap, you stop checking the price tag. You stop grinding. You believe your own hype. This brings us to the high life, the trap, the peak. This is the moment where the empire looks the strongest, but the rot is already in the foundation. Success is a dangerous thing. It makes you soft. When you spend generations fighting to get to the top, you build muscle, you build resilience. But once you're on top, the next generation is born with a silver spoon in their mouth. They didn't have to fight for the wealth. They just inherited it. They don't know the struggle. They don't know the hunger. They get used to the easy life. They get used to the luxury. They believe that prosperity is a birthright, not something that has to be earned every single day.
In this phase, the empire stops producing and starts consuming. You stop being the factory and you start being the shopper. Labor becomes expensive because everyone wants a high wage, but nobody wants to do the dirty work. So what do? You outsource. You look at those poorer countries, the ones who are still hungry, the ones who are still in the mud, and you hire them to build your stuff. You think you're being smart. You think you're getting a deal. But what you're actually doing is teaching your rivals how to play the game. You are handing them the blueprints to your own castle. The British did it. The US did it. We sent our manufacturing overseas. We sent our technology overseas. We taught the rest of the world how to build the things that made us rich. And we sat back and bought the finished products on credit. And that is the killer. Credit. Debt. When you're rich and powerful, banks line up to lend you money. They throw cash at you. So you borrow. You borrow to buy the big house, the nice car, the expensive military bases in countries you can't find on a map. You borrow to keep the party going because you feel like the good times will last forever. It's a psychological trap. You bet on the future being just as good as the past, but it's a bubble. You are living on the front. The wealth isn't real anymore. It's all leverage. It's all paper. It's a house of cards waiting for a stiff breeze. While the elite are partying, while the stock market is hitting all-time highs, the reality on the ground starts to shift. The wealth gap explodes. The rich, the ones who own the assets and hold the political power, they use their influence to rig the system even more in their favor. They buy the politicians, they write the tax loopholes, they ensure the money print that works for them. Meanwhile, the working class gets squeezed. Their jobs have been shipped overseas. Their wages have stagnated. Their costs are rising. The high life is only high for a select few. For everyone else, it's a struggle. Resentment starts to build. The streets start getting hot. People start looking at the rich not as leaders, but as parasites. The unity that built the empire shatters. The crew breaks up. It becomes every man for himself. This is the phase of decadence. It's the flashy cars, the obsession with celebrity, the loss of shared values. We stop caring about character and we start caring about image. We stop respecting the rules and we start respecting the loophole. The discipline is gone. The hunger is gone. And while we're busy fighting each other, while we're busy posting on social media and arguing over crumbs, the rival powers, the ones we outsourced our work to, are getting stronger. They're saving their money. They're educating their kids. They're building their military. They're watching us getting fat and lazy, and they're sharpening their knives. The Dutch lost their empire because they got too deep in debt and lost their edge to the British. The British lost their empire because they spent all their money fighting wars and lost their edge to the Americans. And now, the cycle is turning again. The bill is coming due. The party is almost over, and the bouncer is coming to clear the room. This isn't just history. This is a warning. And if you aren't paying attention, you're gonna be the one left holding the bag when the music stops. They say the higher you climb, the harder to fall. When you're at the top, when you're sipping champagne and counting your money, it feels like the party will never end. You forget what it took to get there. You forget the grit. You forget the hustle. You get comfortable. And comfort is the silent killer of empires. It starts with the money. It always starts with the money. When an empire is at its peak, it gets expensive. The workers want more pay. The cost of living goes up. The businesses, the ones that actually make things, start looking at the bottom line and thinking, why should I pay an American $20 an hour when I can pay someone in China or Vietnam $2 an hour? So they ship the jobs overseas. They hollow out the middle class. They take the engine of the economy and hand it to their rivals. At the same time, the people at the top get greedy. They stop investing in factories and start investing in financial games. They build bubbles. They bet on debt. They leverage everything they have because the interest rates are low and the money's free. It's like a gambler who keeps doubling down because he hasn't lost a hand yet. He thinks he's a genius, but really, he's just lucky, and luck always runs out. Economists call this the bubble phase. It's when the debts get huge. The government borrows to pay for wars it can't win and programs it can't afford. The citizens borrow to buy houses they can't afford and degrees that don't pay off. Everyone is living on the front. Everyone is pretending to be rich, but underneath the surface, the foundation is rotten. The wealth gap explodes. You have a tiny percentage of people owning almost everything, and the rest of the country fighting for scraps. This creates tension. This creates anger. When the bubble finally bursts, and it always bursts, the government has a choice. They can let the system crash and let the bad debts wash out and face a massive depression, or they can print money. They always choose to print. They flood the system with cash to keep the game going for just a little bit longer. But this doesn't fix the problem. It just makes the money worth less. It causes inflation. The price of bread goes up. The price of gas goes up. And the people who are already struggling get crushed even harder. This is when the internal fighting starts. The streets get hot. You see populism rise up on both sides. On the left, they say, the system is rigged, tax the rich, redistribute the wealth. On the right, they say, the country is losing its way. We need a strong leader to take control. The middle ground disappears. The country splits into tribes. Everyone hates everyone else. The politicians stop trying to solve problems and start trying to destroy their opponents. The unity that built the empire shatters. The crew breaks up. It becomes every man for himself. While the empire is tearing itself apart from the inside, the sharks start circling on the outside. This is the rule of rivals. When the dominant power gets weak, the rising power makes its move. History shows us this pattern over and over again. The Dutch got weak and the British took their trade routes. The British got weak and the Americans took their place. Now, the US is looking shaky and China is stepping up. China is doing exactly what the US did 100 years ago. They're saving their money, they're educating their kids, they're building their infrastructure, they're building a massive military, they're making deals with countries all over the world, offering loans and building roads, expanding their influence, while the US is busy fighting culture wars at home. The scariest part? The conflict doesn't always stay economic. When a rising power challenges a declining power, it often leads to war. It might be a trade war, it might be a technology war, or God forbid, it might be a shooting war. The current friction between the US and China over Taiwan, over chips, over trade, this isn't random. This is the tectonic plates of history shifting. The old order is cracking, and the new order is trying to break through. But here's the truth that the history books scream at us. The biggest threat to an empire isn't the rival across the ocean. It's the rot inside the walls. It's the debt. It's the division. It's the loss of discipline. If the US could get its house together, if we could stop spending more than we make, if we could stop hating each other, if we could start building things again, we could hold off the decline, we could extend the runway. But right now, we're hitting the gas pedal toward the cliff. So, where does that leave you? Where does that leave the regular guy who just wants to protect his family and build a future? It leaves you in survival mode. You have to realize that the cavalry isn't coming. The government isn't going to save you. In fact, they're the ones devaluing your savings every time they turn on the printer.
You have to stop playing by the old rules. The old rule was save your cash in the bank. Today, cash is trash. If you leave your money in a savings account earning 0.1% while inflation is eating 5 or 10% of its value every year, you're losing money. You're bleeding out. You have to own assets. You have to own things that the government can't print. Real estate, gold, commodities, businesses, things that have real value, not just paper promises. You have to diversify. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. Don't bet everything on the US dollar. Look at history. When the British pound lost its status as the reserve currency, the people who held all their wealth in pounds got wiped out. The people who held gold or land or foreign assets, they survived. They thrived. You need to think globally. You need to understand that the world is bigger than just the 50 states. You have to educate yourself. The school system was designed to create workers for the factories in the 20th century. It wasn't designed to teach you how to navigate the collapse of a 500-year economic cycle. You have to be your own teacher. Read history. Understand how the machine works so you can see the moves before they happen. When everyone else is panicking because the market is crashing, you should be calm because you knew it was coming. You were prepared. And finally, you have to build your own tribe. The empire might be fracturing, but your community doesn't have to. Strong families, strong friendships, networks of people who trust each other and help each other. That is the ultimate safety net. When the system fails, people fall back on their relationships. The cycle is resetting. We're in the late stages. The signs are everywhere. The debt, the printing, the conflict, the populism. You can choose to ignore it. You can choose to watch mindless entertainment and pretend everything is fine. Or you can wake up. You can accept the reality of the game. You can understand that the board is tilting and you can adjust your stance so you don't fall off. History is a brutal teacher. It doesn't care about your feelings. It doesn't care about your politics.
Your politics, it only cares about cause and effect. The cause has already happened. 50 years of bad decisions, 50 years of excess, 50 years of ignoring the fundamentals. The effect is coming for us now. The storm is here. But if you were smart, if you were prepared, if you were disciplined, you don't have to fear the storm. You can ride it. This isn't the end of the world. It's just the end of an era. And every ending is a new beginning for the people who are ready to seize it. The game is rigged, yeah, but now you know the rules. Now you have the playbook. The rest is up to you. Don't get played. Get prepared. Class dismissed.